Hello, how are you?
I'm doing great today. I'm
Thanks
so
for having me on.
yeah, thanks for being on here. And I'm so excited to talk to you. You're in a way more beautiful environment today. And I love how there's trees and nature behind you too. So we're going to have a conversation today about ADHD and humor.
Hmm.
And I I love that topic. I absolutely love that. And I know that we have met through an ADHD coaching program, and you always make me smile. And I also know that you do stand-up comedy. So that's why I asked you to be my guest to talk about this topic. So
Awesome.
yeah. So David, let me start by just asking, can you tell me a little bit about yourself personally and professionally to just introduce yourself?
Okay. Well, I'm 49 years old. I am not God's gift to the world. I am more the world's gift to God.
Mm.
So
Thank
I've been
you.
a truck driver I was a truck driver for 27 years, and I was kind of looking for a change with other things going on with my life. And you know, I have combined type ADHD. My youngest daughter has combined type ADHD. My son and daughter from my first marriage have combined type ADHD, and my grandson all have combined. We all have combined type ADHD. So we have that wonderful gas and fire spark that just brightens up the world, right?
The
But I
passion.
also my current wife has the inattentive type, so
Mhm.
she's got all the distraction and none of the fun.
Well, you bring fun into her life, so thank
That's what I
goodness.
keep telling her.
So when did you find out that you had ADHD? Was it after your children were diagnosed or before?
I officially was diagnosed about 5 years ago,
Okay.
so I always knew I had ADHD.
Hmm.
Except we didn't call it that back in the day.
Right. It's kind of,
Back in the 70s and 80s, it was just hyperactive with an inability to pay attention.
mhm. Gotcha. Yeah, it has been kind of more recently. It's gotten more awareness about how these symptoms can be considered combined type ADHD or inattentive type. That's something that I didn't learn either as a young adult or even a young professional. I agree within the last 5 years is when I started learning more too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So tell me, how does humor it help you with your ADHD symptoms?
Ah, I think humor is really important for everyone because it helps at everything, right? Because it does one thing that nothing else can do for us. It keeps the world in perspective. So
Yes.
even when I was grieving the suicide death of my son,
Mhm.
humor really played a very important part in that for me because it kept the perspective that not only is the sun going to rise today, but it's still going to rise tomorrow, and my love for him is going to go forward. And humor allowed me to see past that grief, and humor allows me to see past the things that hold my ADHD, see past where ADHD can feel like it's holding me back, or allows me to have the grace to, you know what I mean, to kind of embrace that. If that
Yeah.
makes sense.
It's almost like forgiveness, forgiveness with a twist at the
Yeah.
same time. And it does, I like how you said that it helped you through grief because it does make you see that there's like the irony, the things go on, even though, things in our past have been frustrating and devastating or
Mm-hmm.
upsetting. And yeah, it is a whole perspective shift. I really like to laugh a lot myself because there's that saying, if you don't laugh, you cry sometimes because
Sometimes.
yeah. And especially with ADHD, symptoms can be so frustrating and it can just be like you just get to a point where you're like, oh my gosh, I've forgotten one more thing, or
Mm-hmm.
I've done this the 500th time. I know better.
Yep,
Um,
and you got to be able to laugh that off and see the humor in it.
yeah.
Otherwise, you're just going to beat yourself up over it.
Mhm. So you use it as a tool to almost bring compassion to yourself, compassion and forgiveness, and just lighten up the heaviness of the struggle that it can be sometimes.
Yep. It's the key for me to unlock those other issues, the compassion and that.
Mhm. Oh, I like that. Yeah, it absolutely. It can be a key for sure.
Mhm.
Well, tell me, when did you start to, I know you do stand-up comedy. What led up to you wanting to go out there in the world and share your comedy and humor with other people?
Oh, thought you said we only had 20 minutes. No, I'm just kidding.
I want to hear the long answer. It's all good.
It's well, after my son's death, part of my grieving process was a decision that I needed to become more part of the world and then answer to the pain that I could feel in our world and stop shoving my head down in the truck.
Mhm.
But I had, social ADHD, were socially awkward. I grew up around a lot of talkers. So, by myself. So, I never had to really speak for myself or talk to people. So my social awkwardness was really bad.
Okay.
So I got into, I took some improv comedy classes to really kind of start that process. And that helped me really learn to better listen to people because it's all about the yes and, right?
Mhm.
It's the key to improv. You're constantly building with the next person.
Okay.
You had to listen, you had to communicate, and it was a structure that I could understand the communications in, so I was able to relax and do more of it. And then as I got into coaching and went back to college,
Mhm.
I took a advanced intercultural communications course.
Ooh.
And our big assignment for the semester was that we had to spend half the semester in a culture that we didn't necessarily know a lot about.
Okay.
And being from the Twin Cities and a 49-year-old white man, to dig into the Somali or the Karen or black culture or Asian culture,
Mhm.
I already had a good understanding of all them, and it was such a spot that everybody was going, and such an obvious spot that I should go to,
Mhm.
that I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
So I kind of narrowed it down to, as I thought about it, either Bigfoot hunting or stand up comedy. And stand up comedy just seemed a little bit more accessible in Minnesota. So
Gotcha. So it was something that you started with a class about improv. You learned the yes and kind of style of building on conversations. And then your teacher challenged you to go out there and like jump into a culture that you were unfamiliar with, and that stand-up comedy, it absolutely can be a culture. They're a whole you're a part of it now. So what would you say is that culture, an inviting, accepting one for someone with ADHD?
yes,
Okay.
I think so. I have personally found open mics to be rather accepting
Yeah.
group. At this level,
Mhm.
nobody's really competing with anybody else. There's not really any of that cutthroat stuff. It's a pretty supportive environment.
Nice.
So, and it's I think a lot of the comedians, if they don't have ADHD, are definitely sympathetic to the ideas behind it because they're leaning that way.
Yes. I think I live in St. Louis, and I know quite a few people who are in the stand-up comedy circle here, and I'm not diagnosing anyone, but I see qualities in all of them that could relate to ADHD.
Yep.
So it seems like it could be a very accepting culture, accepting crowd to be a part of. And like you said, it's not a competition. And it's more of kind of just putting yourself out there and trying. So
Yeah,
that takes a lot of courage and that takes a lot of bravery.
thank you.
Yeah. Well, tell me, I guess, other things. Do you, as far as comedy goes, do you plan things ahead? Like as an ADHDer myself, I kind of more live spontaneously than everything planned. Do you go in with a plan for your monologues or your,
Yes, I do.
you do? Okay.
All day long, I plan, I plan, I plan.
Uh-huh.
Then I get to the show, and then I rewrite my entire thing between the start of the show and when I get on stage.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, yeah. So plan really is it depends on how you want to look at the word plan. I mean, it occurs. I don't actually follow it, but there was a plan.
It's a loose, rough draft, it sounds like, that kind of helps you build for later, build the original content.
Solid part of the plan pretty much stopped at I'm going there tonight.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. And I think that what I've read and what I know from my own experience that, you know, it's like percolating. We need to have an idea in our head and we run it around and it's like that idea percolates.
Yep.
And sometimes that's considered like that's one of those things that people sometimes say, oh, you're being lazy because you're not doing things immediately. But sometimes those great creative things just take a little while to percolate or to process and then be spontaneous and be creative later in like a cool burst.
Yeah. Yeah. Or we need some other kind of impulse to change our direction a little bit. You know,
Mhm.
somebody we're all over the place. Either we're hyper focused on one idea, in which case we can't see anything else, or we're looking at this entire field of ideas.
Yep.
And sometimes, you know, when somebody else says something, it can trigger us to look at something. Oh my God! Right. That's the key that moves us in a new creative direction.
Mhm.
It kind of brings all. May bring other ideas together, or you're like, yeah, that's not going to work. But it does. You know, it's that outside influence. It's not that we're changing for it. It's that it's showing us a new window
Mhm.
or a new path.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love how, I mean, humor is creative, 100% creative. It's us
Mm-hmm.
shifting what's a typical perspective to something that's ironic or something that we can, you know, find the humanity and the humor in. So I love that part of how you just said that, yeah, it is sometimes an outside influence, but then we're mixing it all together and creating something to go forward. Well, what are other ways? So as an adult with ADHD, you use humor to help kind of lighten the seriousness of life and also lighten the ADHD symptoms. What other things that you do to help with your ADHD symptoms, like hobbies or other interests that you have?
It all kind of it all starts with one thing,
Okay.
right? And that is you have to love the person that you are. You know, it's just like when Cindy talks about uh, parenting the child you have.
Mhm.
We have to love the person we are, right? Not the person that society, mom, dad, our loved ones that we think we should be. It all starts with doing that, and for me that means, you know, I love to cobble things together.
What do you mean
When
by
I
that?
build and repair shit, I don't really want a blueprint and the exact right stuff to do it.
Okay.
I really love to use as much of found materials as I can. You know, when I'm building a wall, I'll slap 2x4s together and different things and try to make it come up and down and I do everything with I also to my I know that I'm going to be taking this apart.
Okay.
It's not I remodeled my entire house with the idea that I was going to remodel my entire house again later on. So I screwed it, I tend to screw in more than nail because it's easier to remove later.
Mhm.
Which, it drives my wife absolutely insane, but
So the renovation, the cobbling kind of renovations that you do, do you have one currently going on at your home or
my home,
yeah, your whole home?
pretty much the whole house. Yeah. It's not quite that bad, but yeah, everything is kind of, I've got my office is part of, I took a back porch and
Uh-huh.
took the screen windows out that were 3 season and put a little bit of insulation in and used the wood I had around the house
Oh.
to make an office. And then, I used the other stuff I had around the house to kind of slap together a little like lean to on the side of the house to kind of break the wind and get a little bit more storage because we had to live in a really small, old house from the 1880s.
Ooh.
And there's no damn storage in those places.
Mm-mm. Nope. Just living quarters. That's it. Yes. Okay, so that's a pretty cool skill. So you build things with your hands and just try to add things to your home to give yourself more storage and do that. So that's a beautiful way to keep your hands busy and also keep your mind busy. Um, do you do anything as far as any routines daily that help with ADHD symptoms? Like, do you use a schedule, timers, that kind of stuff? The anything that
Um,
sticks out to you that really helps?
Not particularly.
Okay.
I think that eventually they're going to break ADH down into a lot more than three types,
Yeah.
right? And one of those types is going to be, for lack of a better terminology, the chicken with the head cut offs.
Yes.
And they are, and I am one of them, and they are the people that just, that's where comfort is
Mhm.
for me. I keep trying to do lots of different things,
Yeah.
lots of different schedules, because I live in a world that doesn't appreciate that. So I keep trying these things, but none of them stick for me, and a lot of them almost become problematic. Right? I want to rebel against that.
Yeah.
That time was telling me I've only got this little bit of time left, so there's a train going by me in the background.
Okay.
I hear the people yelling.
I did. That's funny.
The tourist train up here. So, but it's that I can't be told, and the time timer tells me.
Hmm.
So I generally stay away from the timers. I I use my phone a lot for scheduling,
Me
right?
too.
Because it's right there with me.
Yep.
And I only lose the phone a couple times a week.
Only.
Where, yeah, only. Where I find it again. But
Mhm.
when I write down schedules and calendars and date books and that, I lose the date book, or I set it to the side and I don't look at it for a week and a half, and I bring back, then I got to update it, and then I set it aside again, and I'm good for a couple of weeks, and then it goes bad again.
Ah. So you're finding what works for you. And absolutely, this is one of those things that thank goodness for phones because they do keep everything centralized and a lot of information can be stored on it. They can be distracting, but they also are beautiful tools.
Yeah, but that's where you get back into that loving who you are,
Hmm.
right? Because when you're a chaos like me, you have to be able to love that you're not going to be the organized person.
Hmm.
You have to accept that. All right, as frustrating as it is to try to track all this shit in a chaos mode, that's the way that works for me,
Hmm.
right? I just have to. I suppose I add time to everything.
Oh yeah.
I I'm all if you say one, I'm aim. I automatically set the timer. Set a half like 15 minutes earlier.
Hmm.
I'm constantly trying to be that early. That way, I'm only 10 minutes late.
Yeah, and I do the thing where if a project only takes like somebody else 30 minutes, then I times it by 3. And I know it might take me an hour and a half to finish something. So yeah, I set my timer earlier and then overestimate the amount of time things will take me.
Yep. I try to use cash
Mhm.
because the credit cards particularly, even beyond debit cards, there's that now not now aspect to them,
Okay.
right? They get it. So I'm distracted. The money's not real when it goes that way, right? It's not. I'm not. So I try to use this cash as much as possible because then I see the money going away.
Hmm.
So that's part of those daily things that I do to kind of help not manage,
Cope
help
with
keep ADHD in directed in a friendlier fire kind of a zone.
friendly
Right?
fires.
When you're dealing with explosives, you want to be on the bomb range. So I try to keep myself sitting around the bomb range.
Just to be careful, just right there in the midst of the.
You know yourself. You know things are going to go bad. So just, and that's where we get into the stuff like crap. I wrote it down because I wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, sure.
Thinking about it today.
Of course.
Impulse control.
Hmm.
Impulse control, and that there's a lot of debate out there whether we have a limited supply of it or not.
Right.
I think that we do, and that for most people, that supply is great enough that it doesn't really matter.
Mhm.
But for ADDers, it really does matter, right? Because if we've got a limit, if we got a limited supply of impulse control, it's important for us to get that impulse out, or
Mhm.
let that impulse reign in positions where it can.
Right. In
Not,
healthy ways.
yeah,
Yeah.
in healthy ways. I don't even know about healthy ways. Just in places where it's not going to create significant problems,
Okay.
right? Because healthy would be great. It's not always the world we live in.
Not always. Yes.
No,
Because there are.
I
Yeah.
mean, dancing in the store,
Mhm.
right? Or running through the house screaming even and yelling, even though your wife is pissed as hell at you and has a migraine. It's not healthy, but it's going to be a lot less problematic than some of the other impulse control issues you might, them buying the new truck or kissing a pretty girl walking down the street. Things can go really bad, really fast with impulse control.
Yeah. And I kind of liken that with so it's kind of like our physical needs or our sensory needs. Sometimes we just need to do things and let that energy out. If it is hyperactive or combined type ADHD, we typically do have kind of bursts of energy and bursts of I don't want to say weirdness, but just like we need to do things that soothe us in our own unique ways. And so for me, it's like I talk a lot with my hands. I'm a hand flapper and I like to move. And it's not always socially acceptable to move, but maybe I do want to dance in a store sometimes, or maybe I do want to run through the house flapping my arms. So I agree with that 100%. That's a impulse to take care of like a physical need or a sensory need.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's that taking care of your needs in a position where, like I said, it's not maybe healthy or socially acceptable, but it beats the hell out of some of the impulse alternatives. If you try to control your impulses all the time, you're not going to be able to.
Right. It's going to
When
build up, explode.
where you really have to be able to mind your P's and Q's,
Mhm.
right? When you're on a crowded elevator, there are certain things you just can't do.
Yes.
And I don't mean farting, right? You can't punch that guy. Doesn't matter how much he's talking. You can't do it,
Right. Yeah.
right?
And
You
that
you yeah.
and that impulse control is easier when we take care of ourselves and like, when we're more vulnerable, like tired or hungry or angry, those kind of things definitely make us more vulnerable. And sometimes it's harder to hold those impulses or control the impulses. Um,
Exactly.
but
And you
yeah,
want to make sure you're saving that strength for those times.
yeah. Yeah, I like how you said that. Absolutely. And I view, because I do a lot of things impulsively too, but I consider them adventures or
Yeah.
fun or stimming. Sometimes I just need to, do things that keep my hands busy that are,
Well, we can't ever get lost.
what do you mean?
Well, to get lost, you have to start from point A
Uh-huh.
and try to get to point B,
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
You're an AD deer. You start at point A, a squirrel runs across the path. You're no longer headed to point B. Now you are off to a new and previously undisclosed location.
That's
And
the
you're
fun of life, right?
back to B at a different journey.
Yeah, it is going with the flow sometimes with ADHD and having that humor to be like, okay, I'm going to follow this. I'm going to follow this fun trail, or I'm going to follow this squirrel, or I'm going to just look into this for a little while and I'll get back to that other thing later. And we got to have joy. We got to have fun in life for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to go back to what you said too, that self-compassion and just being able to, like, if you did get lost, or maybe we never get lost with ADHD, but if you did have a plan and then things do change, that self-compassion and just knowing that life is okay if it's chaotic. Sometimes life is okay if it's not what you planned, and still to love yourself, even though it's not exactly maybe the picture in your mind of what you wanted your life to be like at times.
It's not that fast, especially when you got the kids in the car, and you're on trip. It's not that. All right, it would be great if we had been out of the car in an hour and a half, but we're gonna be together, for another 2 hours now, and it's gonna be okay.
Yep.
You survived this long. You've dealt with everything life is throwing at you. You're gonna deal with this too.
It's a little bit of discomfort, but in the grand scheme of things, it's all gonna be okay.
And you're never gonna know what's gonna come along. You might, because you're in that car for that extra period of time, have a great conversation with your daughter about making smoothies out of babies.
What?
Yeah, that's an actual conversation that happened.
And you didn't plan for that conversation to happen. It just happened.
It was one of those rolling on ADHD moments where she couldn't remember the word for little or small smoothie. So she came up. She came up with she wants a baby smoothie, and of course I immediately went to QAnon and their whole thing about eating. It's like, oh my God, that's right. They're absolutely right. My babies are tender, right? We eat young animals because they're. Oh my God, could you imagine trying to make a smoothie out of an old person? You'd have all those bits in there, medical pieces. It's all big grizzly.
And your daughter probably was like, yeah, gross, Dad. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we went on for quite a while, and after about 15 minutes, my wife asked us both to please stop. After half an hour, she banned us from ever speaking about it again. So it's been a revolving bit in my comedy, and for the remainder of that trip, it was a kind of code word between me and my daughter. We weren't actually saying it, but we were saying it.
Yes. And you sound like you have such a special bond with your daughter, and like you guys understand each other very well and like have the same sense of humor and the same type of combined type ADHD.
Yes, unfortunately for Mom, she's my daughter.
She's got your genes. Yes.
That's the problem with marrying a funny person.
Mm-hmm.
They're always funny, and then you breed and you get little funny people, and there's no escape.
And then you're surrounded.
And you're stuck forever. Then you're either going to laugh or drink.
Well, hopefully your wife can laugh sometimes. Doesn't.
I actually think so.
Yeah. Well, that humor, it's one of those qualities that I admire in you, David. And that's one of those qualities that I do look for in a lot of people that I connect with, because if people are too serious, sometimes it's kind of a red flag to me that, oh gosh, they might not be able to accept me. So I do as an ADHD individual, like I seek out people who are funny because I feel like I can connect with them a little bit more. So,
excellent.
yeah.
I'm glad you can connect with me.
Yes. Well, tell me, the last question I have, so I know that you're an ADHD coach that works with adults and also parents, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. If someone out there wanted to connect with you and kind of felt like it would be a good fit, how do they get in touch with you?
They can find me through my website, justbeingvisible.com,
Okay.
or social. I have Facebook and Instagram, where I occasionally, as you mentioned, post bits about ADHD. It's just being visible at both of those, and then just being visible at Gmail.
Perfect. Okay, so just being visible. I love that. And you're being very visible with your stand-up comedy and just getting out there. And also, I think you're helping with the stigma of ADHD too, because you are talking about it in your stand-up comedy routine too. So I love it.
You're not alone in these things, and it's not a problem, right? You're just who you are, and good God, embrace the fact that you are probably never bored.
Yes. I've got 1,000 projects and 1,000 ideas. Yes.
They're bored as hell. They're dull. It's never been a problem for you.
Yes, yes, I do embrace that. I absolutely do embrace that. It's a fun part of having ADHD. It's a strength. I think it is for sure. Oh, go ahead.
I think it really helps reduce your stress.
Yes.
Because you're not, you could just, it's just, you're not stuck in that boredom where all you can see is you've got all these other things coming in to distract you.
Mhm. No, you're on to another project and on to this and on to another skit. Yeah, it is a beautiful aspect of having ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you so much for our conversation today, David. I really appreciate you taking time and just talking to me. And I wish you the best and take care.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. I appreciate the time.